there are places on this planet where humanity does not belong. Dead zones where the wind whispers secrets and the cold devours the living. In the brutal winter of 1959, 9 of the Soviet Union's most experienced, elite hikers marched into one of these dead zones. They expected an adventure. They found a nightmare. They were young, brilliant, and fearless. Students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, led by a charismatic 23-year-old named Igor Dyatlov. Their destination was Mount Otorten. In the local language of the indigenous Mansi tribe, the name translates to one chilling phrase: "Do not go there." On January 23rd, they boarded a train, laughing, playing guitars and singing songs. It was the last time the civilized world would ever see them alive. By January 27th, they reached the edge of the wilderness, leaving the last human settlement behind. The temperature plummeted to -30 degrees. The cold was a living monster, clawing at their faces, freezing their breath into crystals. Yet their diaries showed nothing but high spirits. But as they pushed deeper into the Ural forests, the landscape began to change. The trees became twisted, gnarled, as if deformed by fear. On January 31st, they arrived at the base of the mountain pass. Ahead of them lay a slope known to the locals as Kolatshakal, the Mountain of the Dead. A sudden, violent blizzard hit the mountain, blinding the hikers and forcing them off their planned route. Unable to see, Dyatlov made a fatal decision. Instead of retreating to the safety of the forest below, he ordered the team to pitch their tent right on the exposed, freezing slope of the Mountain of the Dead. Around 5 p.m. on February 1st, they crawled inside the tent, ate their dinner, and prepared for a freezing night, completely unaware that something was watching them from the dark. Dyatlov had promised to send a telegram to their sports club by February 12th. February 12th came and went. No telegram arrived. At first, families weren't worried. Delays were common in the wilderness. But by February 20th, silence turned into terror. The government ordered a massive search and rescue mission. Soldiers, planes, and indigenous Mansi trackers combed the mountain. For 6 days, they found nothing but endless, mocking white snow. Then, on February 26th, a searcher screamed. He had found the tent, but what he saw froze the blood in his veins. The tent was nearly buried in snow. It was completely empty, and most terrifyingly, it had been slashed open from the inside with a knife. Whatever happened that night, it was so sudden, so deeply terrifying, that the hikers didn't even have time to undo the tent door. They had to cut their way out to flee. Inside the tent stood their boots, their heavy winter jackets, and their food. Everything needed to survive was left behind. Outside, in the snow, investigators found a trail of footprints leading down the mountain. Footprints made by people who were barefoot or wearing a single sock. 9 people had sprinted out into a -30-degree blizzard, completely underdressed, running for their lives into the pitch-black night. The footprints led down toward a massive cedar tree at the edge of the forest, exactly 1 mile away. It was there that investigators found the first signs of death. Beneath the branches lay the remains of a small, pathetic campfire and the frozen bodies of the first 2 hikers. Their hands were shredded to the bone. The bark of the giant cedar tree was torn up to 5 meters high. They had been desperately trying to climb the tree. What were they scanning the dark for? But as the medical examiners turned the bodies over, the mystery didn't solve itself. It exploded into a nightmare that defied all logic. The autopsies of the first 5 bodies found on the slope revealed a shocking truth. None of them had fatal injuries. They hadn't been murdered. The cause of death was listed as hypothermia, freezing. They had simply given up, lain down in the snow, and let the cold take them, all except one. Rustam Slobodin's body revealed something disturbing. A fractured skull, not fatal, but caused by a blunt force. But there were no external wounds. It was an internal trauma. This crack could be explained by a fall in the panic, but the mystery of what caused that panic only deepened with the final 4 hikers. They weren't found until 2 months later, on May 4th. Buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine, another 75 meters deeper into the forest. They were found in a natural shelter, wearing each other's clothes, desperately huddling for warmth. They were the most heavily clothed of the 9. But it wasn't the cold that killed them. Their autopsies unleashed a new level of horror. Nicolas Thibault Brignoles had a massive skull fracture. Semyon Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubenina both had catastrophic, lethal, crushing injuries to their rib cages. Their ribs were shattered, broken like glass. The lead medical examiner, Dr. Vozrozhdeny, testified that these injuries were equivalent to the force of a car crash. The ribs were broken on both sides, suggesting a powerful compression. And yet, like Slobodin, they had no external wounds, no bruises, no scratches, no signs of impact. Whatever hit them had passed through their bodies, breaking their bones without damaging their skin. It defied all known logic. And then there was Lyudmila Dubenina. She was found lying face down in a stream. When they turned her over, they found her face mutilated. Her tongue was missing, torn out from the root. Her eyes were gone, parts of her upper lip were missing, and her facial tissue had been dissolved. The examiner's notes stated it was absent. How does a tongue get torn out, face down in a frozen ravine? The autopsy offered no explanation. The initial investigation was rushed, closed quickly. The verdict? A compelling force of nature. This phrase, vague and empty, explained everything and nothing. It satisfied the state, but it did nothing for the families. They knew their children. These were not novices. They were hikers who had faced worse storms and lived. They wouldn't just give up. And then came the weirdest detail of all, the radiation. Tests conducted months later revealed that the clothing of 3 hikers found in the ravine was radioactive. Wool sweaters and trousers emitted beta radiation. Where did it come from? Mount Kholat Syakhl is not known for any natural radiation. Was it atmospheric, or did it come from whatever attacked them? As the years passed, the case became a ghost story, a legend, and with 0 official answers, the human imagination began to construct its own nightmares. The investigation was officially reopened in 2019, 60 years later. The state concluded it was an avalanche, a small, unique slab avalanche. But this theory doesn't explain the cuts in the tent, the running, the radioactive clothes, the crushed bones without impact. It feels like an official story designed to calm a ghost. The avalanche theory didn't close the case. It only fueled the fires of conspiracy. Because the mists of the Mountain of the Dead hold secrets too terrifying to officialize. If it wasn't an avalanche, what forces were at play? The void left by official explanations was quickly filled by theories of the macabre. Theory 1. the Mansi shaman's curse. The hikers had invaded sacred tribal land and paid the ultimate price. The Mansi are indigenous to the Ural Mountains. Their folklore is deep, rooted in a world of spirits, where the mountain holds immense, sometimes violent, power. Local legend says the mountain is home to 9 spirits who were slaughtered there. The number 9 is central to the curse. These 9 hikers were destined to join them. Did the hikers desecrate a holy site? Were they ambushed by shaman warriors protecting their gods? Some points align. Tribal ambush would explain the torn tent, the sudden flight. They were cornered. But this theory falls apart on one detail: the crushed bones without impact. This level of force, applied internally, points away from human attackers and toward something massive. Which leads us to Theory 2, the Ural Yeti. The Soviet Union had its own legends of cryptids, the Almas, the abominable snowman of the Ural Mountains, an apex predator with unimaginable strength. A Yeti attack would explain the crushing injuries. The creature could simply squeeze them. But how does it attack 9 people in a tent at once? And why only crush 2? It doesn't explain Lyudmila Dubinina's missing tongue, torn out from the root. Predators don't target tongues like this. Scavengers might, but not from a frozen body lying face down. This level of mutilation, combined with the impossible crush injuries and the eerie silence, began to suggest forces beyond the natural world. Could it have been an acoustic attack? Theory 3. Infrasound. Low-frequency sound waves that can crush human bodies and induce mass panic. Infrasound can be generated by wind blowing over unique mountain formations. When it hits the right frequency, it can resonate inside the body, shattering bones and causing internal hemorrhage. This would explain the internal injuries without bruising. It would explain the instant panic. But infrasound doesn't tear out tongues. It doesn't make clothes radioactive. No natural theory can connect all the dots. Every explanation only solves a fraction of the nightmare. This points away from nature and toward the unnatural. It suggests a force that was invisible, silent, massive, and left behind traces of radiation. This is not the pattern of a curse or a cryptid. This is the pattern of technology. In 1959, the Cold War was at its peak. The Ural Mountains were a hotbed of secret Soviet military activity. Were the hikers just 9 people in the wrong place at the wrong time? Theory 4. A secret weapon test gone wrong. Other hiker groups in the area reported seeing strange, glowing orange spheres in the sky on the exact night the Dyatlov group died. These weren't just simple lights. They were massive, silent phenomena. What were they? Some believe they were tests of experimental R-7 rockets or nuclear-powered ICBMs. A test missile could have malfunctioned and exploded directly over the tent. This would create a shockwave, invisible, massive, and deadly, that would hit the huddling hikers like a car crash. The external, unblemished skin and shattered ribs match an atmospheric blast. And it would explain the radioactive clothes. A nuclear detonation, even a low-yield test, leaves isotopic traces. The hikers, panicked by the explosion and blinded by the light, slashed their tent from the inside and fled into the blizzard, only to freeze under the cedar tree. This theory connects almost all the dots: the crash force, the panic, the radiation, the strange lights. But it still doesn't explain the missing tongue.